Hi, welcome back. Professor Wills here at Pasadena City College. We're continuing our discussion of Mesopotamia in our Ancient Worlds class, focusing on art history. We've just dug in a little bit with the Sumerian world. We've met their ziggurats, those sloped temple platforms upon which they erected a large temple and believed that they could interact with their gods or goddesses. Speaking of gods and goddesses, we've met the goddess, perhaps the goddess of love and war herself, Inanna, in the form of our first Sumerian sculpture. Let's take a look at more sculpture as we get into statues used in the ziggurats themselves and other places of worship. But these aren't statues of deities. These are statues of average mortals like you and I. So let's get back into our PowerPoint time machine here and take a look at what I'm talking about. All right. Oops, moving on here. Very good. Let me minimize myself so you can see those images. All right, from current slide. Fabulous. Okay, so we're great. Let me introduce you to statuettes of two worshipers dating from circa 2700 BCE. What you see are a larger image of a male and female statuette. This is a detail shot of those same statues and an enlarged shot of the face of the male example. These sculptures would have been created from a very easy to carve stone gypsum. Gypsum is the medium, and their sizes are not life size. They are pretty diminutive. The male figure approximately about 2 feet in height, the female about 1.5 feet. All right, what you find here with Sumerian sculpture is that this type of sculpture appears more than once. So they're fairly generic. As you can see, there are many examples that look like the two that we're focusing on. And so why is that? Why are they kind of generic? Generic male, generic female. Maybe the males might have no facial hair and some have facial hair, but they lack kind of individuality. And the reason is that these were kind of mass produced, and you can find on them cuneiform writing, right? Sumerians are behind cuneiform writing, and they would have the names of Sumerian citizens. Sometimes they would have dedications or prayers inscribed upon the bases of these figures. And that's why historians now believe that these were placed in these temple waiting rooms to await the interaction with that Sumerian god or goddess. Because, of course, you know, to wait there yourself, you have no idea if that god or goddess will show up in a week or a month or a year. But if you have something representing yourself like a proxy or a stand-in, then you can go about your daily business, right? Take care of your family, go to work, whatever. That's the purpose of these statuettes, and that's why they have specific individualized inscriptions on them, though they look generic. So what you often find with these figures is they have very strong kind of geometric forms. You might notice that the shirtless male, which is a very typical costume in the ancient world, has kind of a conical, cone-like shape, representing his kind of layered skirt that he wears, or tunic. The female, much more like a cone, or I'm sorry, a cylinder, in her kind of off-the-shoulder dress that she is wearing. Another characteristics of these statuettes is they have teeny tiny hands. Some of you might be a fan of Kristen Wiig and know that SNL skit where she has little hands and gets into all kinds of funny mischief on that comedy show. But yes, teeny tiny hands that are often clasped in prayer. or they might be holding some kind of a cup, a libation, like a gift to a god or goddess. What's also characteristic of these statuettes are their large kind of googly eyes that you see here. That is meant to communicate eternal wakefulness, meaning these guys are not going to go to sleep. They are on duty 24/7, awaiting interaction with that god or goddess. So this is another example of concept over naturalism that you find in the ancient world. Whereas that head of Inanna, her face was relatively in proportion, right? Here you see an exaggeration of the eyes, mysterious description in very diminutive small size of the hands. But again, it's all meant to communicate reverence, devotion, and eternal wakefulness, as these figures are meant to wait for that god or goddess. The one thing that I find very naturalistic is that you have this beautiful draping over the arm of the female figure here. The effort to sculpt that is interesting and very curious. That kind of naturalism of how the fabric drapes over the arm was attended to, whereas the thick ankles, not so naturalistic, right? In any event, the statuettes of two worshippers, something you would have found in a temple waiting room if the actual owner couldn't be there. Okay, moving on to the standard of war. Let me make myself disappear here. This is another example of something that was found in one of those royal cemetery digs that I showed a few lectures ago to you, that all the wonderful, incredible finds from that royal cemetery. So this is like a two-sided box. It also features small scenes on the very sides, but the main sides have the same formatting. And what you commonly find in the ancient world in figurative art is scenes are organized in registers or bands. So this is what I'm talking about. This is a register or band. This is something the Egyptians are going to do as well. And so though this isn't particularly a large example of Sumerian art, it only measures maybe about 1.5 feet by 1 foot in height, it does tell us something about their culture and civilization, because both sides are decorated with themes that have to do with war and peace. War and peace sounds like a title of a famous novel I have yet to read, by Tolstoy. But yes, themes like this are iconic and go all the way back to Mesopotamian ancient art history. All right, so the box itself is made of wood, but it is inlaid with a beautiful blue stone, and I'm wearing blue for you today in celebration of it, called lapis lazuli. So this is abundant in places like Afghanistan. So it's another, like marble, imported medium that is not indigenous to Iraq, but reserved for very important artistic expression. That is what you find with the standard of war. There's an example of it in the museum to give you a sense of scale next to that visitor. Now I'm showing you the two sides of that standard. There's a hole in the bottom of that box, so it would have been mounted on a pole and paraded around like a flag. You might know from those of you who did marching band in high school, the tall flags those tall flags are called standards. So that's why this is called the standard of war, found in the city-state of war. So the two sides here have a theme that are distinct from one another. One, not surprisingly, has to do with war, the other with peace. Let's begin with the war side. Now, when you read what's going on here, you start on the bottom and take your eyes then to the top. It's kind of the opposite of what we're used to with our graphic novels and Sunday funnies, right? So here you see a series of horse-drawn chariots. So by then, the invention of wheel has happened. They're creating vehicles for war. And these chariots are shown doing slightly different things. And you can tell if you look at the horses, they begin to open up their legs into a gallop. And if I had a detail shot, which I wish I had for you, you would see trampled bodies underneath. So they are literally mowing down the enemy, which is communicating, the dominance and victory at war. The second register depicts the Sumerian military. They're all identical to one another in costume. So that communicates discipline and orderliness. Compared to what you see on the right, where people are looking a little bit more naked and disheveled, that is the conquered enemy. Those are the prisoners of war. Finally, on the very top, you have an additional chariot, more soldiers, more prisoners of war, and they're being presented to the king, who is in the center of the composition. Now, he was no NBA basketball player. Just because he looks so tall here doesn't mean he was in life. This is something called hierarchy of scale. Hierarchy of scale is a common device in the ancient world to emphasize somebody of importance by making them the largest figure in a scene, often in the middle. So this is an example of hierarchy of scale. This helps us, among all the figures, find where's the most important person, the king. There he is. And the enemy is being brought to him because he has been successful in conquering that enemy. So this is the message of victory, of success on the war side. On the peace side, down below, you see something much more celebratory and relaxed. So again, beginning at the bottom, you can see all kinds of people bringing in supplies on their backs, animals. This continues in the middle register as well. Additional supplies and animals are being brought along, and that's because a big party is happening, and you need your supply. You need the meat for the barbecue. But up above here on the very top, you can find easily the king once again through a hierarchy of scale. He is seated in a throne, which is a common classic description of authority we'll see for millennia in this class. And the guests are seated as well, holding cups in their hands, enjoying the festivities. And the music, you have a harp player right here. So a little close up here to show you a detailed shot of some of those soldiers. Look how they're presented in composite view. That's very recognizable to us. It was invented in the Neolithic world, enduring in Sumerian arts, and we'll see it throughout Mesopotamia, by the way. So the composite view continuing as well. Now, what you find also is this harp player on the far right. So I will get to that in a content page on your Canvas lessons on Mesopotamia, but here this slide really shows you the fine, thin slivers of lapis lazuli used to form the blue background of these scenes, in addition to limestone and shell to form the beautiful inlaid treatment, the inlaid decoration of fundamentally a wood box that forms the standard of ore. What you also find commonly in the ancient world, and we'll be seeing this often from time to time, is the mix of figurative art with abstract design. So figurative art with abstract design, whereas the figurative art represents all the scenes of the human activity. The abstract design are these sort of diamond-like elements that form the borders around the registers or bands. So there you have it, the standard of war, communicating that the king of Sumeria is the bringer, is the bringer of peace and the victor or successful conqueror against the enemy, protecting his people. All right, have a great day. Thanks for joining me.